So Senator Bernie Sanders has just gotten some endorsements in his bid to become presidential nominee on the Democratic side. Now, the endorsements came from 7 black South Carolina state representatives and were actually announced ahead of Sanders' speech to the state's legislative black caucus on Thursday. Now, one of the endorsements that also followed this was the South Carolina AFL-CIO, President Emeritus Donna DeWitt. So now these are amazing. Now Sanders' South Carolina State Director Quadro Campbell said of this, quote, "We're proud to have the endorsement of some of South Carolina's most distinguished elected officials, labor and faith leaders. With their support and the support of thousands of volunteers across the state, our campaign is building a grassroots movement that will fundamentally transform this country." Now, you might be wondering, wait a minute, South Carolina, who cares? No, it's actually a really big deal. For one, anybody who's living in South Carolina immediately is like, hey, wait a minute, who's saying it doesn't matter? No, they are an important state. They're actually an incredibly important state when the Democratic primary for a couple of reasons, right? For one, it's a very early state. So you want to do well in the Democratic primary, you're going to have to pick up South Carolina. Now, the other reason, of course, is it's an incredibly diverse state. So if you do well in the Democratic primary, you end up picking up a lot of delegates in the South. Now, the reason that's also super important is because it shows your strength with black voters. Black voters are the backbone of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is a very diverse party now, and black voters are super, super, super important and super relevant. So you want to get as many as much of the black vote, as much as black support as you can get. Now, because of that, there have been a lot of people that have been heavily campaigning in South Carolina. Now, Sanders, of course, has been there. Senator Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, Robert Francis O'Rourke, they've all been there campaigning very heavily, and they have picked up, at least a few of them have picked up quite a few important endorsements. Now, let me go to Sanders' endorsement first. Among the lawmakers endorsing him are Representative Crystal Simmons. Now, she's the first black woman to represent the Low Country region in the state house, and State Representative Terry Alexander. Now, Terry Alexander is not a new endorsement. He actually supported him as well back in 2016. Now, Simmons in a statement had said, quote, "Bernie Sanders is a champion for women's rights and has been rocking with the middle class and minority communities since before he was popular. What he did back then matters just as much as it does now." So I think that's really important. And I know centrist heads just exploded on Twitter. He's a bill with women's rights. What are you talking about? He's a misogynist because he went against Hillary Clinton. No, that's not actually true. He ran a competitive primary. It was actually not as nasty as the 2008 primary. And I think that's something that a lot of people who didn't actually live through the 2008 primary don't understand how nasty it really was and how actually tame the 2016 primary in the Democratic side actually was. But again, if you don't study the history, you're not going to necessarily be aware of that fact. And also, let me give you a statement here from Alexander, who said, quote, "I support Senator Sanders because I believe in his positions that will move the country forward. His openness to change, his progressive stance on issues that impact so many people. This is why I was one of the first legislators in South Carolina to endorse him in 2016, and I am doing so this year so that we can finish what he started many years ago." So those are two of the biggest endorsements there. There are 5 others as well. So I think that's going to help out a lot. Now, compared to other candidates, he's actually doing really well. You have Bernie Sanders with his 7 endorsements, and you have Kamala Harris right behind him with 5. Cory Booker has 1 endorsement, that's State Representative John King, and Robert Francis O'Rourke, who's also, like I said, been campaigning really heavily there, has State Representative Marvin Pendarvis. So Senator Sanders is actually very competitive in this state, at least when it comes to endorsements. And he's been that way because he's actually been working very, very hard to reach out to the black community and to black lawmakers. So now, Right now, as I said before, he actually really needed to start doing that because back in 2016, he got crushed in South Carolina. And again, he didn't just lose, he got annihilated. Hillary Clinton won the state by 47.5 points. I mean, you could say that was one of the definitive defeats during this election that kind of set the stage to Bernie Sanders losing the primary. You also have, of course, New York and California, which were also incredibly decisive blows against Senator Sanders. But now, some of you might be surprised about this, right? I mean, there's this pervasive myth about Senator Sanders being hated by the black community, and so there might be some genuine shock that he's getting such high-profile endorsements and is polling really well. But again, that myth is just that. It's not true. If you look at some of the polling, Sanders has actually polled pretty well among the black community, even back in 2016. Now, Clinton just happened to have done better with black voters, especially older black voters, but it turns out both of them actually had pretty decently high approval ratings. This is Hillary Clinton had much higher approval ratings among older black people, and actually they were split among black millennials. Now, I'm not exactly sure why Hillary Clinton was so favored by the black community in that area. I don't know. In a Gallup poll conducted at the beginning of 2016, though, however, it shows that Bernie Sanders was not hated by the black community. The opposite. 53% of black Democrats had a favorable view of Senator Sanders. And that's back in 2016 with very little name recognition. Only 16% had an unfavorable view. Now, Hillary Clinton had a 70 plus percent approval rating. Her favorability ratings in the black community were 82% favorable and 12% unfavorable. So that was her biggest, base of support was the black community. Now that changed for Senator Sanders. A December 2018 Quinnipiac poll found that 55% of black voters had a favorable view of Sanders, while 26% had an unfavorable view. So both favorables and unfavorables went up quite a bit. But that was last year. So how is he doing now? Well, there's another poll by Morning Consult conducted in March, at the end of March, and they found that he had improved quite a bit since then. 71% of black Democrats had a favorable view of Bernie Sanders, compared to 10% who had an unfavorable view. So that polling matters. But he has been consistently over 50% and is now even more popular among black voters. And I think a lot of that is, of course, him reaching out to the community, and he's gotten rewarded with these very important endorsements. So he's never been hated by the black community, was never super unpopular. It's just that they didn't know him as well as they knew Hillary Clinton, and then he just had to do a lot more outreach and a lot more work. And since 2016, he has done exactly that. And so all this now shows, of course, is that in these early states, Bernie Sanders now has an advantage similar to what Hillary Clinton had back in 2016. And that shows that he is now a force to be reckoned with in the Democratic primary. And it also dispels that nasty rumor, that nasty myth that Bernie Sanders is hated by the black community. It's not true. And these poll results and these endorsements show you. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.